Welcome to the 29th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's audio magazine podcast. Ear to the Ground features interviews and field reports related to sustainable agriculture, family farming, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm your host, Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. As I record this, the temperature here in Minnesota is well below freezing, and the forecast calls for the mercury to hover below the 0-degree mark by week's end. But in the western Minnesota town of Milan, an 18 by 24-foot island of summer is confounding the weather forecast by producing fresh, green vegetables for 15 families. Carol Ford and Chuck Weibel have developed a passive solar greenhouse on the side of an old garage. It's low-tech, but the thinking that went into the greenhouse is anything but simple. They have combined engineering, thermodynamics, and innovative organic vegetable production techniques to create a winter garden amongst thousands of acres of frozen corn and soybean fields. Greenhouse vegetable production is nothing new, but the design, operation, and low-input nature of this one is fairly unique. Through the help of a clever system that utilizes heat storing rocks and fans, the greenhouse produces these vegetables almost entirely without the benefit of supplemental gas heat. Ford estimates that last year they used about $50 worth of propane to heat the greenhouse during unusually long stretches of cloudy weather. The greenhouse also grows vegetables without artificial lighting. Ford and Weibel are in the second season as a winter community-supported agriculture operation. Like a traditional CSA operation, Garden Goddess, as our operation is called, sells subscriptions to consumers. In return, they provide a weekly delivery of fresh, organic produce. But that's where the similarities end. Garden Goddess is starting its season in the fall, just as most other vegetable operations are shutting down for the year. They started the Winter CSA after taking the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Beginnings course. Through the course, the gardeners learned how to research and create the kinds of information networks needed to develop an enterprise that is breaking new ground. They also learned how to create a business plan that would make it possible for a completely off-the-wall proposal to be taken seriously by lenders. On a recent winter night, with prairie winds blowing in more snow, Ford gave me a tour of the Garden Goddess greenhouse. Well, here we are. We're in western Minnesota. We're in Milan, and we're at Carol Ford's greenhouse here. I guess this is called what we call a cold greenhouse rather than a hot greenhouse. It's about 20 degrees. We're in getting towards the middle of January, towards the end of January, actually. It's snowing tonight. We're inside this place, and even though we don't have a heater going, it's 50 degrees inside here. And so, Carol, maybe you could describe a little bit why I'm not looking at a bunch of dead, frozen greens here, but I'm actually looking at line after line of beautiful greens that are just doing fabulous here in the middle of winter.
Well, it's magic, Brian. That's what it is. Actually, it's a lot of research. We decided to put the best components that we learned about for a passive solar greenhouse into this structure. So it has, from the ground up, it's got a 4-foot block foundation with, the blue stiff insulating foam on the inside of that. That goes down 4 feet. That bottom 2 feet of that excavated stuff is rock. And it has perforated tile that runs through it. And then above that is the soil. Now, that perforated tile is connected to pipe that goes up to the peak of the greenhouse. And when that peak area gets to 70 degrees, there are fans that kick in. So it sucks that warm peak air that would otherwise be wasted down into that rock bed below the soil. And it helps keep the soil warmer. This soil never freezes. In fact, it never gets below 50 degrees, the soil. Wow. And also the back of the greenhouse, the north wall, and half of the sides on the east and west are heavily insulated and solid. And the front part is twin wall polycarbonate. And it's made, and my husband Chuck could tell you the degree angle of
it's quite an
of it.
Sharp angle we've got.
Yeah, it's made for midwinter to allow the maximum amount of sun in based on the angle of the sun at that time of year. So we get the most sun when we need it the most. We also have some water barrels that are along the back wall. They gather warmth during the day and then slowly release it at night. They help moderate the temperature in here as well. And as a backup, if it ever gets down below 40 degrees, we have a little propane heater that kicks in.
Now, to the typical person who's familiar with a greenhouse, the way that this differs is maybe your typical, what you would call a warm greenhouse, is you're actually trying to warm that air as much as possible, whereas you're relying on warming the soil and then letting the physics take place, or whatever you call it, and having the air rise. And so that's the main difference that we're looking at, I guess, is that you feel that's more efficient to warm that soil rather than just trying to warm a huge big area full of air.
That's what the research told me, and how it's ended up panning out in here, is that as long as we can keep the soil warmer, the air temperature can be cooler, and we still get the same amount of production. But that also takes into account selecting varieties that are cold tolerant. I mean, we're not growing tomatoes in here. We're growing broccoli and pak choi and all kinds of different greens. Yeah,
give us a little bit. We're looking at, well, people can't see this, but we've got rain gutters hanging from the roof here, and we got some stuff growing on the ground, but we've got. Just give us a little bit of a laundry list of what we got grown here. It's like well, you were describing it before. You got like tubes of chia pets all across this thing. It's just amazing to see, and we got snow falling outside, so it's quite a contrast. So give us a little bit of a list of what we got grown here. This is January 23rd right now.
There's a lot of different greens in here. This one right in front of you is arugula. A lot of people are probably familiar with that one here. Try that.
All right.
It's not as fierce as you think. Like in the summertime.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, because when they grow here in the winter, everything's milder, so you can grow more bitter greens, but they're not as intense. This one right here is cress. So it's here, I'll feed you. It's nice and peppery, isn't it?
Oh.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
Yeah.
This one, it's kind of a spoon shape, very dark green and very succulent looking. We have a lot of Asian greens in here because they all happen to be pretty cold tolerant.
Okay.
This one's called tatsoi. Kind of like spinach, but with a little more zip to it.
Oh,
yeah. And then I do grow a lot of different kinds of mustards. This one over here is called Mizuna.
Kind of looks like a dandelion type leaf.
Yeah, Mizuna has different varieties that are different shapes. But again, you can tell that it's not as fierce as you'd think a mustard green would be.
Yeah.
Okay, walk this way with me, dear.
Right.
This one with the little heart-shaped leaves, that one's called Claytonia. That's a very mild green. So people who have little kids like to have this one.
Yeah.
After the first cutting, the leaves that come back are even more pronounced in the heart shape, and they get a little flower at the base where the leaf meets the stem, and it's all edible. So that one looks real fancy. I've got some spinach growing here. Now there's a cool one back there. Can you see the stuff that looks like grass?
Yeah.
That one.
I was looking at that earlier today.
That one's called minutina.
Huh.
And at first people get a little freaked out, by it because they think, why is there grass in my salad?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's actually a green that grows. Now the one above it, I'm going to go pick one of those for you, okay? Because this one's one of my favorites. This one is red Russian kale. Look at that leaf. It's got like a purple stem.
Yeah.
And it's a nice beefy kind of leaf on that baby. Doesn't that taste good? Don't you feel like you're really eating something? Yeah.
Fiber here.
And then the other really fun one for color is the bull's blood beets. And they get deeper in color the colder it is. So these guys are like rubies.
Yeah.
And yet they taste, they've got that beet taste, but it's kind of mild.
And it's nice to have something other than something green in here.
Yeah. And I've also got the ones down there are mustard greens. And that's a red Asian mustard. They both are.
Yeah.
And then the one above that is the one I told you about before, the funky, it's called vitamin green, which is a terrible name for, who would eat that? But they're actually, here, I'll grab one. See how much bigger? It's like tatsoi, but the leaf is much bigger.
Wow.
Isn't that nice? And it's got great color. I've got just some, mixed lettuces back over there. And there's more arugula. There's a lot of arugula in here right now. But my shareholders really like it.
Yeah.
So, and it does very well this time of year, and I can get 3 or 4 cuttings off of that before I need to replant it. And you can see by these baby greens here how fast they come back.
Yeah.
These are just a week old.
No kidding.
Yeah. And they'll be ready to put out by the end of this week.
And give us a little bit of a rundown of your season. You're putting this stuff in the fall? Is it like October, and then you go to when?
The CSA deliveries run from mid-October to mid-April.
Okay.
So I'm planting in here in September. And there's also in the beds here, we've got, in the ground beds, we've got broccoli and pak choi, Chinese cabbage, mosh, and kohlrabi, and some renegade arugula that fell out of one of the planters. Look at that stuff. It's like, what are you doing there? And there's also, this weekend I'll be planting some radishes in here too.
So just when everybody else is putting the gardens to bed for the year, you're firing up.
That's when I'm getting started, man.
Yeah.
And we're planting almost every week, filling up these hanging planters. And then as they get worn out, we rotate them out and bring in these new ones. So right now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 planters ready to go in. And these soil blocks have more pak choi in them. So they'll be going in a couple of weeks. I like to let them stay on heating pads for a little bit longer. It seems to help them get a good start in the soil once they go in.
We had talked a little bit earlier about how this is really a unique system. You had to do a lot of research, and your partner Chuck did a lot of research. He had a lot of books on solar stuff from the 70s, but also it's new technology, and you kind of had to plow your own path in making this system here. And what you're hoping is to maybe make this a model that other people could replicate. Could you talk a little bit about that, what you're trying to hope to do with this maybe a little bit in the future?
Well, one of the things that they taught us in that Farm Beginnings class was, risk management. And it felt safer to me to start something this unique at a small enough size that I wouldn't have to quit my job. Mm-hmm. So I am able to keep my full-time job and run this greenhouse and this CSA. It's working out pretty good for us as far as that goes. Well, at this point, the facility that we have is 18 by 24. And it produces enough greens along with our stored root crops for 10 shares. So that's obviously not something that somebody's going to quit their bank job for. But it does generate income. And so what we're trying to do is create it in such a way that it generates enough income that it could be a viable... Well, there's 2 ways to go. One is that even at this size, it could be a viable component of a diversified farm. That could maybe even make the difference between whether or not one of the people on that farm has to take a job off the farm or stay on the farm and do this. And that's when it becomes exciting to me, because there's nobody I know living on a farm that wouldn't rather be working on the farm.
Right.
Now, the other one is, because of the size of this thing, it has applications even in an urban environment. You could build this thing on top of a building in the city. Mm-hmm. Or you could build it, if you had a good southern exposure, you could build it off a house in the city. The southern exposure is the key thing. You can't have shade. Right. You need all the sun you can get. But, one of these could be built as part of a school, or as part of a daycare, or any other kind of facility. It could be, planted on top of a building that has a restaurant in it. Because what we've found is that people in Minnesota get so excited when they find out that they can eat greens like this, like you and I just ate, right, fresh out of the greenhouse in January. And you can do it. We're doing it. It's right here. Yeah. Yeah. More people could do this, and that's what I'm really, really hoping will happen as we talk about it more and learn about it more and tell people what we're learning in here, that they can feel confident to try it too. That's the part that I want to be able to share.
What's the coldest it's ever been outside, and you've still been able to produce in here?
Let's see, I think the coldest it got last winter, at one point it was about 10 below. But, quite often in those January days when it gets that cold, it's a still sunny day. And so in here it'll be 80 degrees. And let me tell you, you grab yourself an iced tea and your summer hat and your T-shirt, and you come out and sit in the greenhouse, and it's all worth it on that day. The whole thing. It's a real perk.
Real perk of the job there. Yeah. Well, I came in here earlier with Chuck, and it was, I suppose, around 24 degrees. It was partly cloudy out. Walked in here, and it was 82 degrees. And, man, it felt good.
It was hard to leave, wasn't it?
It was a shock to leave again into that brisk wind.
Yeah, and it's so nice and humid in here too, you know. So your skin just sucks it up because it feels good.
For more on Farm Beginnings, see www.farmbeginnings.org. That's www.farmbeginnings.org. You can also call 320-269-2105 or 507-523-3366. That's 320-269-2105 or 507-523-3366. Send your comments and suggestions about this podcast to me, Brian DeVore, at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org. You can also call me at 612-729-6294. A special thank you goes out to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician who provided Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a very special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member and would like to support us, go to landstewardshipproject.org to learn how to join LSP. Thanks for listening.